important to note that if the spiritual journey is difficult for you right now, I just want to validate that and know that it's going to be sometimes. It's going to be all of the butterflies and rainbows and synchronicities that I think society has promised it or made it to be. And it's also going to be a lot of shadow work. It's going to be a lot of dancing with discomfort and surrendering the control of trying to fix that discomfort and trying to heal through that discomfort. Get ready to see Emo Jasmine. Hey guys. So I filmed this video literally yesterday and only because I had makeup on, and so I was like, well, if I look cute I should film a video, and then I like just watched it back to edit it and I was like, girl, go ahead and do this again. If what I'm talking about today is very like kind of raw and real, I think that maybe how I show up should kind of be raw and real, and also like, I don't know, I think I was really just, I wanted my like soul motor to be like, I have something to say, as opposed to like, I have something to say and I look cute right now. So you're getting 11 a.m., just woke up, doing her best to figure out what dimension she's in, Jasmine. Which, by the way, if you are new here, my name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor, I'm a journalist, I'm a girl doing her best, and I hope that you are well, or as well as you possibly can be, given the circumstances of existing. So just jumping right in, I have had a interesting, and by interesting I mean incredibly rough, couple of weeks. And of course, I extract every lesson and all the nectar that I can get out of every situation. So I will say that like these past few weeks being as difficult as they were, led me to realize a lot of really important things that I captioned in like a recent Instagram post, if you want to go check that out. And one of the things that I also very viscerally learned over the past 2 weeks, which if you're watching this like around the time that I upload it, it was like that eclipsed retrograde moment that we had around the month of June. But now that we're sort of coming out of it, I'm on the other side of the summer solstice and the full moon in Capricorn, I'm feeling a lot more alivened and like ready to like just be human and embodied and to talk even. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've experienced over these past 2 weeks and what they've shown me, just about like, I think the healing journey and like the misconceptions that come alongside the healing journey, which I think the most important one that I want to immediately say is that even just the word journey can kind of, you know, imbue this connotation that there's arrival and a destination, right? There's a point A and a point B, and we're all just on this journey trying to get to point B. And I think that that can be true if you look at things in a linear fashion, or that you look at time as linear, but the healing journey, just like most things that we look at linearly in a linear fashion, is not linear at all. And the healing journey, the spiritual journey, whatever journey it is that you're embarking on right now, in relation to like self-care and evolution and all of that, it's lifelong, baby. And that's like a really sobering thing, and I think also a very liberating thing, right? I think it's sobering because we have sort of like this destination, this point, this version of ourselves that we're sort of waiting to become, and it's almost like we're holding our breath until we get there. And so I think it's liberating to know that you can exhale and know that there isn't peace you're going to get to, but rather that this whole thing is kind of a lifelong commitment. It's an active choice, and so you can do your best to bring peace along with you instead of waiting to get to it. Because what makes it, you know, not linear, what makes healing not linear is the fact that there are going to be ebbs and flows. And I think the ebbs and flows, rather than, you know, being something we should be scared of or run away from, it's actually like, it's the point of it all. You know, when we're on that ebb, I guess, when we're on the dips and when we're on like the pits of it, we harness so much appreciation for when we're on the up, but also when we're down, we really deepen ourselves, we deepen our souls, we deepen our emotional spectrum, and we sort of like gain the tools necessary to enjoy what life is like when we're on the up. So it's important to know that like, if you're on that part is coming, and if you're on that part, you know, enjoy it and know that if this part happens, you still had that to remember and that to look forward to, right? And I feel like, and I'm just rambling here, so just do with that what you will. If I had to bullet point the things that I'll be talking about, I think the first thing to bullet point is that this is a journey that never really ends. It's a lifelong commitment. It's something that is never going to exactly sort of be wrapped up. There's no like, you did it. I think it's important to appreciate the milestones and the markers, right? And celebrate them. Celebrate when you overcome a certain triumph, or when you work through a certain trauma, or when, you know, you let go of a certain habit, you know, celebrate that. Make sure that you mark that for yourself. But know that life is just gonna be full of milestones and full of markers and full of moments when you feel like you've regressed. But I'll get to that. I'll get to regression. But just first and foremost, know that it's a lifelong commitment. It's not like it's lifelong. So strap in. And so what I was alluding to before was the fact that like when you are down, I think you can feel like you're out of alignment. And I know so many people, for example, I have this video that's like relatively popular that's about, you know, how do I get back into spiritual alignment? And I think it's so popular because people, when they're on like that down, they can be like, oh my God, how do I get back to being connected? How do I go back to like this healing journey? And I think it's important to remember that that is the healing journey. And when you are feeling the most disconnected, it's typically when you're the most in alignment, because that's when you're the closest to whatever you deem God to be, right? Because if you're surviving that, if you're learning through it, if you are hoisting yourself up, you're strengthening your spiritual muscle, you're hoisting yourself up, you're learning about what it means to ultimately make the active choice to commit to yourself, because that is what this whole thing is. This whole thing is a choice, right? Like our healing journey is not something that's expected of us. And actually, I think society would function relative to its definition of smooth. It would function much more smoothly if more people weren't empowered, and if more people just made the choice to like live like stagnant and muted lives. Because when you're empowered, you make decisions for yourself and you don't really feed the bigger machine. But that is a side topic. The point is that it's an active choice to be the best possible version of yourself, and it's like a radical one as well. And so I think those low moments are the moments when you realize that it's a choice, and within making that choice, within even like, you know, sort of dipping into your spiritual toolkit and talking to people and doing whatever it is that you need to do to find your way back to wellness and to break certain habits and cycles and, you know, end certain draining relationships and cut energetic cords, you're the most in alignment, right? You're the deepest. And it's also worth noting, this is another thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of like misconceptions about the spiritual and healing journey, which is that whenever we have, or when we experience like regressions or relapses, or when we fall back onto like old habits and old ways and old versions of ourselves, we can villainize ourselves, we can be really mean to ourselves, we can demonize that moment. But it's just important to note that those are, I think, the most important part of the journey, because it reminds you of the fact that this is an active choice, right? When you experience what it means to fall back into like old versions and old patterns, you're sort of back in that like vessel, back in that timeline that feels probably really uncomfortable. There's a lot of discomfort because of the fact that you've outgrown it. You're different now. Your DNA doesn't really resonate with it. So even when you have those like moments where you kind of like maybe disappoint yourself, it's important to know that those are so crucial for you really finding sustainability when it comes to your journey, because of the fact that it's reminding you that it's a choice, right? It's not something that's handed or expected or natural. It's an active choice to be your best self, to be your highest self, to be as spiritually awake as you possibly can. And I always, you know, come back to the saying that you need to look backwards in order to move forward. And I think, you know, looking backwards to move forward, I think there are instances when that's really, really true. I think there are also instances when like the past does not need to be revisited, but there are moments when you really need to like kind of be back in old settings to be like, oh, this is why. Like, this is why I exert the effort that I exert to pour into my healing, to pour into my evolution. So if you're in one of those moments when you're like, I am doing shit I thought I like have fully, you know, or even if I'm processing old wounds that I thought I had healed through, know that you need to, because it's clarifying why you choose healing. And on the topic of like regression and past versions of yourself, I think this is probably the most important thing to point out about the healing journey. If you haven't already, give yourself the space, the time, and whatever it is that you need to process mourning past versions of yourself. Process mourning whatever it is that you've had to forfeit or lose or grow out of on this healing journey. I think we can get so obsessed with becoming better that we often villainize the versions of ourselves that have carried us here, or we think, you know, oh, that's when I was like asleep, or when I was, you know, still embarking on those old habits, or whatever the case may be. And then when we relapse, we like are mean to ourselves because we're like acting in the shoes of like old versions of ourselves, and it's maybe because of the fact that we didn't even give them a proper memorial, or even give like our old way of living a proper farewell. Like, you know, I for instance, a beautiful example of this is like when 2020 happened, there was like this very large narrative that, you know, thank God all of this happened. I mean, obviously it's tragic, and, you know, we're mourning the loss of so many, and, you know, there's so much fear, but, you know, good thing society is waking up, because this new normal that we're gonna rebuild is going to be so much better. We're gonna be more like inclusive. We're gonna, you know, really value presence, and, you know, like our social activity is going to be much more intentional, and like all of this beautiful stuff that is being born and will continue to be born from the pandemic, and experiencing that is beautiful, right? It's what was supposed to spiritually happen. It's like the awakening. We're dipping into the age of Aquarius. Like, yes, that's supposed to happen. But it's also worth noting that though our old system was broken and corrupt, well, we're still in the system, but like, even though, you know, on surface our way of living before was very surface, it's important to note that that was home for us. And even if you're moving out of that house and into a more beautiful home, it's important that you bid farewell to that old home, because it still houses parts of you, parts that created you, parts that molded you, and ultimately parts of you that got you to where you are now. And you wouldn't be where you are now if you didn't experience that. And so I say all that to say that when you're on this spiritual journey, it's important to let yourself mourn maybe just like attachments and ways of being that you now villainize, when ultimately it was just your way of being. So yeah, you have to mourn the loss of the old you. You have to mourn the narrative that you may have had for yourself, right? Even if you thought that, you know, before you embarked on this spiritual journey that you were going to go into like a different career path, or, you know, there was a relationship that you really thought was going to make it through, and now as you spiritually evolved, you realize that it's not in alignment with your highest good. And like, yes, great, I'm so glad you realized that, and now you're on a path towards like actually, you know, mirroring your true partner. But you should also still give yourself the space to like bid farewell to what you thought would be, because that's important for our emotions. We need some sort of closure. If not, we're just gonna be kind of like walking half undone and not sure why there's like these weird pockets of void that we feel. So I feel like everything I'm saying right now is probably so vague, because I guess I haven't even like disclosed what I've been going through, but it's all been really emotional, and I think I've been having to face really like 3D themes while still finding the balance between like my 5D self and like seeing the spiritual meaning of everything, but also like kind of looking through the lens of rationality as well. So like, I think another part of this healing journey is that you're going to always have to find the balance between so many different things, and ultimately it's like that balance between being human and being spiritual, 3D and 5D, receiving help and letting yourself receive help, and doing things in isolation and in solitude, having boundaries and being limitless. Like, there's just a constant tug and pull between like where you find yourself in the center. And I think maybe that's the whole point of this, is to find balance. There's a piece of dust floating. I should really vacuum in here. And so to put some sort of like succinctness into the way that I have been rambling for however many minutes, I just think it's important to note that if the spiritual journey is difficult for you right now, I just want to validate that and know that it's going to be sometimes. It's going to be all of the butterflies and rainbows and synchronicities that I think society has promised it or made it to be. And it's also going to be a lot of shadow work. It's going to be a lot of dancing with discomfort and surrendering the control of trying to fix that discomfort and trying to heal through that discomfort. That's a big lesson I've learned. I think it's like, I've been experiencing so much, and I'm like, okay, what journaling prompt can I write through to fix this? And like, what essential oil do I need? And it's important to know that the healing sometimes comes with sitting right next to that discomfort and like looking at it in the eye, and, you know, acknowledging that it's there, and acknowledging the fact that like, this is uncomfortable for me, but this is where I'm at in my journey, and I know that there's meaning behind everything. If something remains true, it's that everything is happening for some sort of purpose, for some sort of lesson, for some sort of part of your evolution. And so sometimes you just kind of have to surrender if you don't see the bigger picture, and know that like someone's typing it out, you know, and that what you can't control in circumstance, you can control in response. So if, you know, nothing outside of you is making sense, and if you feel like you have a loss of control of like, you know, wow, I've really made it so far in my journey and I'm being humbled right now, know that you can choose how you perceive the situation, how you respond to it, how you react to it, and how you take care of yourself. Really, really, really do your best, which is something I'm also working on, to show compassion for yourself. If you feel like you're regressing, if you feel like you're relapsing, or if you feel like I'm out of alignment, like, no, you're not. I promise you, you're not. And if you feel like you are, you'll find yourself back into that space where things are clicking again. Everything is cyclical. And if we see so many, you know, seasons and cycles, you know, within the earth, right? Like the actual seasons, or then the moon phases, or, you know, people with uteruses having like menstrual cycles, right? Like everything is cyclical. And so I think it's important to apply that to the healing journey as well. There are going to be moments when it feels, there's a mosquito in here. There are going to be moments when it feels like jelly and when it's easy, and oh my god. No, I agree. I do. There are gonna be moments when it feels like the universe is in constant communication with you and when everything is just kind of flowing easily. And there are gonna be moments when you have to do the shadow work, when you have to sit down, when you kind of have to be on the low. And it's important to not get attached to either. If you're in the low, don't drown in it. And if you're on the high, don't like close the book and think like, ah, I'm here and this is where I'm settling either. Let yourself enjoy to the best of your capability wherever you're at. If you're on a high, don't think like, oh, I'm gonna lose it, but rather like just sit with it, be in it, and know that, I will say, why it's worth committing to this journey is that the lows become much more manageable when you build that spiritual muscle and when you build the strength to, I think, just perceive it as something that's happening for you and not to you. And when you can do your best to separate yourself from yourself, look at it from an omniscient point of view and see what larger is playing out here, what are the roots of what's happening, and like what are you supposed to be learning right now, and decide whether you want to make the active choice to learn it or to stay in whatever version of life and whatever chapter of life you found yourself at. Do you want to evolve more? Do you want to kind of just stick around? You know what I mean? I hope that this made sense. I kind of just started talking, but I don't know. I think it's important to get humbled sometimes. I felt like I was at a part of my journey where I was like, oh girl, like, yeah, spiritual counselor, let me let the people know. Not untouchable, obviously, but I thought that I had like a really I thought that I was really, really like anchored in my foundation of self, and I thought that like the major lessons I've learned and like everything else that I'll experience from here on out is just like sprinkles on top of a good life. And oh girl, the way that I was humbled. But the shadow work is important, and I think if anything, my Pluto in the 12th house enjoys it. So be kind to yourself and know that you're exactly where you're meant to be, and that the choice to continue on this journey, the choice to commit to yourself, is always going to be the best choice. So yeah, and that's all. So I hope that if there's one person on this planet that heard a sentence I said that resonated, that they took with them, then my job is complete. So I'm so grateful for you sticking around if you stayed this long. And of course, feel free to subscribe and follow me on Instagram at JasmineKylene or LilaLuna.tv for more conscious content. But otherwise, yeah, I hope you're good. And next time you see me, hopefully I'll have more energy and life in me. I'm honoring the ebb and the flow, darling. Bye guys.